Crick stood in the center of the arena like a living nightmare made real. His 7-foot frame was covered in thick gray skin that looked like it had never been hurt by anything. His arms were longer than most creatures, entire bodies, and they ended in hands with claws that curved like knives. Each finger was tipped with a black talon that could punch through steel plates like they were made of paper. The Vorthak species had evolved on a world where everything hunted everything else. Their planet had no safe places, no hiding spots, no mercy for the weak or slow. For millions of years they had fought and killed and eaten their way to the top of their world's food chain. They were born hunters who lived for the thrill of the chase and the satisfaction of the kill. Crick had earned his place in this arena through 17 brutal victories in tournaments across the galaxy. He had fought creatures twice his size and creatures 10 times faster than him. He had faced opponents with poison and fire and lightning, and he had defeated them all. His reputation was built on the broken bodies of those who had underestimated his skill and ferocity. The crowd loved him because he always put on a good show. He did not just defeat his opponents, he destroyed them. He made them suffer before he finished them off. He turned every fight into entertainment that left the audience screaming for more blood and violence. Now he looked down at the tiny human girl standing across from him, and he could not believe this was really happening. The tournament organizers must have made some kind of mistake, or maybe this was supposed to be some kind of joke to entertain the crowd before the real fights began. Hana stood quietly with her feet slightly apart and her hands at her sides. She was wearing the same plain gray jumpsuit that all newcomers received when they arrived at the space station. Her clothes looked cheap and flimsy compared to the natural armor and weapons that most fighters possessed. She had no claws, no fangs, no spikes, no poison, no thick skin to protect her. The difference in size between them was shocking. Crick could have picked her up with one hand and thrown her across the arena without any effort at all. His head was level, with the ceiling lights while she barely came up to his chest. Her arms looked like twigs compared to his massive limbs. Her whole body probably weighed less than one of his legs. The arena master stepped back to give them room to fight. But before he could signal the official start of combat, something happened that changed everything. The crowd had been getting restless, waiting for the massacre to begin. Some aliens were already placing bets on how many pieces the human would be broken into. Crick decided he was tired of waiting. He turned to face the crowd and spread his arms wide like he was accepting their applause before he had even won the fight. He spoke in his own guttural language that sounded like rocks grinding together, and the translation system carried his words throughout the arena. He told the crowd that this was an insult to real warriors like himself. He said that humans were a disease that had somehow infected the galaxy with their weakness and stupidity. He declared that after he finished with this pathetic example, no human should ever dare to enter a real warrior's arena again. The crowd cheered and roared their approval. Many aliens stood up and shook their fists or claws or tentacles in agreement. They had been thinking the same thing, but Crick had the courage to say it out loud. Humans did not belong here among the strong and the fierce. They belonged back on their little blue planet, hiding in their caves like the scared animals they truly were. Then, Crick did something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Without turning around to face Hana, he dismissively waved his hand backward toward her. It was not meant to be part of the official fight. It was just casual cruelty, meant to show how little he thought of humans in general. But his casual backhand was delivered with the full strength of a Vorthak warrior. His massive arm swung around like a club, and his clawed hand struck Hana across the face with enough force to kill most smaller creatures. The sound of the impact echoed through the arena like a gunshot that made everyone fall silent. Hana was lifted off her feet by the blow and thrown sideways several yards before she hit the metal floor and rolled. The crowd expected her to stay down. They expected her to be unconscious or dead from such a devastating hit. Many aliens were already laughing and pointing, thinking the fight was over before it had officially begun. The left side of Hana's face was already swelling, and turning purple blood ran from her split lip and nose. Her left eye was starting to close from the swelling. She pushed herself up on her hands and knees and stayed there for several seconds, shaking her head to clear it. Crick had turned back to the crowd and was raising his arms in victory. He was soaking up their cheers and applause. He had made his point about human weakness, and now he was ready for the real tournament to begin. He did not even bother to look back at his victim. But something was wrong. The crowd was not cheering anymore. They were staring past him with expressions of confusion and something that might have been concern. Some aliens were pointing behind him and making urgent gestures. Others were backing away from the arena railing as if they suddenly felt unsafe. Crix finally turned around to see what had captured their attention. Hana was standing up. She was wiping the blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. Her face was bruised and swollen, but her eyes were clear and focused. She was not crying. She was not begging for mercy. She was not asking for the fight to be stopped. Instead, she was looking at him with an expression that made his predator instincts suddenly scream. Warnings his species had spent millions of years learning to recognize dangerous prey, and right now, every instinct he possessed was telling him that something had changed. Something fundamental and terrifying. The small human girl who had looked so helpless just moments before was now standing differently. Her weight was balanced perfectly on the balls of her feet. Her breathing had become slow and controlled. Her hands were no longer hanging limply at her sides, but were held ready at waist level. Most disturbing of all, she was smiling. It was not a happy smile or a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that predators made when they finally found prey that would be fun to hunt. It was the smile of something that had been pretending to be harmless but was now ready to show its true nature. The arena had become completely silent. Thousands of aliens who had been laughing and cheering just moments before were now watching with growing unease. They could sense that something was different about the human, but they could not understand what had changed. Crix felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm air in the arena. He had faced down creatures that could breathe fire and shoot lightning from their eyes. He had fought monsters that could regenerate lost limbs and opponents that could turn invisible, but he had never felt the kind of primal fear that was now creeping up from the deepest parts of his brain. The human girl took a step forward, and then another. Her movements were fluid and controlled like a dancer or a fighter who had trained for years. She was no longer the frightened victim who had been knocked down by his casual blow. She was something else entirely, something that his species' ancient memories were screaming at him to run from. But Crix was a proud warrior who had never retreated from any fight. He pushed down his instinctive fear and reminded himself that she was still just a tiny human girl who probably weighed less than his breakfast. He had hurt her badly with one casual hit. If he actually tried to fight her seriously, this would be over in seconds. The arena master looked back and forth between them, uncertain whether to officially start the fight or stop it before someone got seriously hurt. The crowd was completely silent now, watching with the kind of fascination that people showed when they witnessed something they had never seen before. Hana continued to approach Crix with that same controlled, fluid movement. Her smile had not wavered and her eyes had not left his face. She looked like she was enjoying herself, like this was exactly what she had been hoping would happen. Crix finally realized that the official fight had not even started yet. His backhand slap had been an insult delivered before the combat began. Now he was going to have to face this human in actual sanctioned combat, while she was in whatever strange state his attack had triggered. For the first time in his 17 victories, Crix began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. What the aliens watching in the arena did not understand was that humans were not like other species in the galaxy. Most creatures that had reached the stars came from worlds that were safe and comfortable. They had evolved on planets with gentle weather and abundant food where the biggest danger was maybe a storm or a small predator that could be easily avoided. Earth was different. Earth was a world that had tried to kill every living thing on it for billions of years. It was a planet of ice ages and volcanic eruptions and massive storms that could level entire continents. It was home to creatures so dangerous that most galactic species would have nightmares just hearing about them. Humans had not just survived on this death world, they had conquered it. They had outlasted creatures 10 times their size and 100 times more deadly. They had survived ice ages that froze most of the planet and volcanic winters that blocked out the sun For years at a time they had faced down saber-toothed cats and cave bears and giant wolves, and they had won. Every human carried in their DNA the memories of a million generations of survivors. People who had hunted mammoths with nothing but pointed sticks. People who had tracked wounded predators through dark forests for days without rest. People who had fought off entire packs of wolves to protect their families. What Crix had just done was wake up something that had been sleeping inside Hana. Something that most humans, in the modern world, never needed to use, something that their ancestors had used to climb to the top of the food chain. On the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, Hana felt the change happening inside her body. Her heart rate was slowing down instead of speeding up like most creatures when they face danger. Her breathing became deep and controlled. Her muscles were flooding with chemicals that had been perfected over millions of years of evolution. This was not panic or fear or the desperate fighting of a cornered animal. This was the human hunting state, the same state that her ancestors had entered when they tracked dangerous prey across frozen tundra, or when they faced down charging predators that could kill them with one swipe of their claws. Her vision became sharper and more focused. She could see every detail of Crix's movements, the way his weight shifted from foot to foot, the slight tension in his shoulder muscles that showed he was preparing to attack, the way his eyes kept glancing toward the crowd instead of staying focused on her. Her hearing became more sensitive. She could hear the whispered conversations in the stands, the nervous breathing of the other fighters, the slight hum of the arena's power systems. She could even hear Crix's heartbeat, which was faster than it should be for a confident predator. Most important of all, her mind became calm and clear, like a still lake on a windless day. All the fear and nervousness she had felt when she first entered. The arena was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating intelligence that was focused entirely on the problem in front of her. The problem was simple. Crix was bigger and stronger, and had natural weapons that could tear her apart if he got a good grip on her. But he was also overconfident and had already shown that he did not take her seriously. He had turned his back on her and struck her casually, like she was not worth his full attention. Humans had faced this same problem countless times throughout their evolution. They had always been smaller and weaker than the predators that hunted them, but they had learned to use their intelligence and their flexibility and their understanding of anatomy to turn those disadvantages into strengths. Hana began to move forward with a fluid grace that made some of the aliens in the crowd take involuntary steps backward. She was not walking like a victim anymore. She was moving like a hunter stalking prey. Her footsteps were silent on the metal floor, and her body moved with the kind of controlled precision that came from perfect balance and coordination. Crix watched her approach and felt his confidence starting to crack. He had expected her to cower or beg, or maybe try to run away from him. Instead, she was coming toward him with the same kind of focused intensity that he had seen in the most dangerous predators on his home world. The crowd was absolutely silent now. Everyone could sense that something fundamental had changed in the small human girl, but none of them understood what it was. They had never seen anything like the transformation that was happening before their eyes. Crix decided he needed to end this quickly, before whatever was happening could get worse. He lowered his head and prepared to charge forward, intending to grab the human and finish her off with one powerful squeeze of his clawed hands. But as he tensed his muscles to spring forward, something in Hana's eyes made him hesitate. It was not fear or desperation, or the wild look of someone who had lost their mind. It was the cold, calculating gaze of a predator that had already figured out exactly how this fight was going to end. For the first time in his life, Crix found himself wondering if he was the hunter or the prey. Hana continued her slow approach, and as she moved, she began to smile again. It was not a cruel smile or a mocking expression. It was the quiet, satisfied smile of someone who had just solved a difficult puzzle. The kind of smile that hunters wore when they finally understood their prey's weaknesses and knew exactly where to strike. The arena master stepped forward and raised his forearms. He was about to officially start the combat when something happened that no one expected. Instead of waiting for the signal, Crix suddenly lunged forward with all his strength. His massive frame moved with surprising speed as he tried to end the fight before the human could do whatever it was she was planning. His clawed hands reached out to grab her, intending to lift her off the ground and squeeze until her bones broke. But Hana was no longer where she had been a split second before. She had moved to the side with a fluid motion that seemed almost impossible for a creature with only 2 legs as Crick stumbled past her, his own momentum carrying him forward. Hana did something that would be studied by military experts across the galaxy for years to come. She grabbed his extended arm at the wrist and elbow using his own strength and weight against him. The crowd heard a sharp cracking sound that echoed through the arena, followed by Crick's scream of pain and shock. His arm was bent at an angle that arms were not supposed to bend. The bone had snapped in at least 2 places, and possibly more, but Hana was not finished. She moved behind the stumbling alien with the same fluid grace, continuing to use his momentum to keep him off balance. Her small hands found specific points along his spine, places where even the thickest armor could not protect the vulnerable nerve clusters underneath. Each strike was precise and controlled, designed not just to cause pain, but to disrupt the connection between his brain and his muscles. She was not hitting him randomly or desperately. She was systematically shutting down his body's ability to function. The entire sequence took less than 4 seconds from the moment Crix began his attack to the moment he started falling toward the arena floor, but to everyone watching it, seemed to happen both instantly and in slow motion. Like watching lightning strike or a star explode, Crix, the 7-foot-tall Vorthak warrior, who had defeated 17 previous opponents, was falling face first toward the metal floor. His legs no longer responded to his desperate commands, and his remaining good arm flailed uselessly as he tried to break his fall. Hana caught him as he fell, controlling his descent so that he would not be seriously injured when he hit the ground. She could have let him crash face first into the arena floor. She could have struck him in ways that would have caused permanent damage or death, but she chose restraint. The fight was over. Crix lay on his side, breathing heavily, but unable to move anything below his neck. The nerve strikes had temporarily paralyzed his body without causing lasting harm. He would recover completely in a few hours, but right now he was as helpless as a newborn. Hana stood over him calmly, not even breathing hard from the brief combat. She looked up at the arena master and nodded once, indicating that her opponent was unable to continue. The official fight had lasted less than 5 seconds, but it had changed everything. The silence in the arena was so complete that the sound of the air recycling system seemed loud. Everyone was staring at the small human girl who had just done something that should have been impossible. She had defeated a proven warrior without taking a single additional hit. Herself. Slowly, whispers began to spread through the crowd. Aliens were pulling up information about Earth, about humans, about this species they had dismissed as weak prey animals. What they found made them realize they had made a terrible mistake in their assumptions. Earth was not a gentle world. It was a death world where only the strongest and smartest survived. Humans were not weak prey animals. They were apex predators who had conquered the most dangerous planet in their local star system. And this small girl had just given them all a demonstration of what that really meant. The giant metal doors opened with a loud hiss, and Hana Kim stepped into the biggest room she had ever seen in her life. The arena was so huge that she could not see the other side clearly. The ceiling went up and up until it became a clear dome, showing the stars and planets outside in the black space. The walls were made of shiny silver metal that reflected the bright lights from above, making everything look like it was glowing. Thousands of strange creatures filled the seats around the arena floor. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some looked like giant insects with too many legs and eyes that glowed red. Some had fur and fangs and claws that could tear through steel. Some floated in the air without wings, like ghosts made of gas and light. Others walked on 4 legs or 6 legs or no legs at all, sliding across the ground like snakes. Hana was small even for a human girl. She was only 19 years old and barely reached 5 feet tall. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the plain gray jumpsuit that all new arrivals got when they came to the space station. Her dark eyes looked around at all the alien creatures, and she felt very small and alone. The noise in the arena was incredible. Aliens were talking and shouting and making sounds that humans had no words for. Some roared like lions. Some buzzed like giant bees. Some made clicking sounds with their teeth or claws. The translation devices that everyone wore tried to turn all these sounds into words, but sometimes they just gave up and made beeping noises instead. Near the entrance stood other fighters who were waiting for their turn. These were the competitors who had come from all over the galaxy to prove that their species was strong and deserved respect in the galactic community. There was a creature that looked like a walking mountain made of gray stone, with arms as thick as tree trunks. His name was Gorvak, and he came from a planet where the gravity was so strong that normal beings would be crushed flat just by standing on the surface. Next to him was Thessia, who looked like a giant snake, but with arms and a head that was almost human. Her skin was covered in bright green scales that seemed to move and shift in the light. Her eyes were yellow with black slits like a cat's, and when she smiled, everyone could see her fangs that dripped with poison that could kill most creatures in seconds. There was Kronks, who had 4 arms and legs that bent the wrong way. His skin was blue and covered with spikes, and his hands ended in claws that could cut through metal like paper. He came from a world where everything tried to eat everything else, so his people had become perfect killers just to survive all. Around the arena floor were more fighters. Each one was bigger than Hana. Most were twice her size or more. Some were 3 times as tall and 10 times as heavy. They had natural weapons like claws and fangs and spikes and poison. They had thick skin that could stop bullets or scales that were harder than armor. Their muscles were built for fighting and killing and winning. When these giant warriors saw Hana walking toward the center of the arena, they started to laugh. It was not a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh bullies make when they see someone smaller than them. The laughter spread from creature to creature until the whole arena was filled with the sound. Aliens pointed at her with their claws and tentacles and whatever they used for hands. Some of the creatures spoke in their own languages, but the translation devices let everyone understand what they were saying. They called humans weak and soft and pathetic. They said humans were just lucky to have found space travel, and that they did not belong among real warriors. One giant creature with too many teeth said that humans should go back to their little planet and stay there forever. The arena master stepped forward to begin the ceremony. He was 12 feet tall and looked like he was carved from black stone. His skin was smooth and hard like marble, and he had 4 arms that ended in hands with too many fingers. When he spoke, his voice was so deep that Hana could feel it in her chest. Like thunder, he explained the rules of the proving grounds. This was not just a fighting tournament. It was how species showed the galaxy that they were strong enough and smart enough to be part of the galactic community. Species that failed here would be marked as weak and would not be allowed to join trade agreements or military alliances or any of the things that made space travel profitable and safe. For humans, this was especially important. Earth was still new to space travel compared to most other worlds. If Hana failed here, humans might be banned from expanding to other planets. They might be stuck on Earth forever while the rest of the galaxy moved forward without them. The pressure was enormous. The fighting would be one-on-one with no weapons, allowed only natural abilities, and hand-to-hand combat would be permitted. Winners would move forward in the tournament. Losers would be eliminated, and their species would face consequences ranging from trade restrictions to complete isolation. From galactic society, as each fighter was introduced, the crowd cheered and roared with approval. They announced Gorvak, who had won tournaments on 15 different worlds. His victories were legendary, and his strength was said to be unmatched. They announced Thessia, whose speed was so great that some opponents never even saw her move before they were defeated. When it was Hana's turn, the arena became very quiet. The announcer looked at his datapad and seemed confused. He read it again and then looked at Hana as if he could not believe what he was seeing. A human female, 19 years old, from the planet Earth. No special abilities listed. No previous combat experience. No victories recorded. No training mentioned. The silence lasted for several seconds. Then someone in the crowd started laughing. Then another alien joined in. Soon the entire arena was filled with laughter again. But this time it was even worse than before. Aliens were pointing and making jokes about how this was obviously some kind of mistake. Maybe the human had gotten lost and wandered into the wrong place. Some aliens started placing bets on how quickly Hana would be defeated. The shortest odds were for less than 5 seconds. Most betting pools would not even take wagers on whether she would win because it seemed impossible. A few aliens threw garbage at her from the stands. Empty food containers and pieces of trash rained down around her feet. The other fighters looked at Hana with mixtures of amusement and pity. Some seemed almost embarrassed that they would have to fight someone so obviously outmatched. A few whispered among themselves, wondering if the tournament organizers had made some kind of error in allowing a human to participate. But Hana did not run away or cry or ask to leave. She walked to the center of the arena with steady steps. Her face was calm and serious. She looked up at the thousands of alien creatures surrounding her, and she did not look afraid. She looked determined. The arena. Master raised all four of his arms for silence. The crowd slowly stopped laughing and talking. The first fight was about to begin. Random selection would determine who would face whom in the opening rounds. A giant spinning wheel with names and symbols appeared in the air above the arena floor. As the wheel began to spin, Hana stood quietly waiting to see who her first opponent would be. She knew that everyone expected her to lose quickly and badly. She knew that the entire future of human expansion into space might depend on how well she did in the next few minutes. The wheel spun slower and slower until it finally stopped. The arena master announced the first match in his booming voice that echoed throughout the vast space. Hana Kim of Earth would face Crix of the Vorthak homeworld. A creature stepped forward from the group of fighters. He was 7 feet tall with arms like steel cables and a face full of razor-sharp teeth. His clawed feet clicked against the metal floor as he walked toward the center of the arena. The crowd cheered his name and waved banners from his home world. Crix had defeated 17 opponents in previous tournaments. Each victory had been more brutal than the last. Against a human, this would not even be a real fight. It would be target practice. The betting pools opened again with even worse odds for the human girl. Hana and Crix faced each other in the center of the arena. The crowd fell silent again. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. They expected it to be over very quickly, but they still wanted to watch. The small human girl looked up at the towering alien warrior and waited for the signal to begin. The arena timing system was connected to the most advanced computers in the galaxy. It could measure events down to thousandths of a second with perfect accuracy. Later, when military scientists and combat experts would study what happened in that arena, they would request the exact timing data again and again, unable to believe what the computers told them. The official fight between Hana Kim of Earth and Crix of the Vorthak homeworld lasted exactly 3.7 seconds from the moment Crix began his attack to the moment his body hit the arena floor. But those 3 seconds contained more violence and skill and precise brutality than most fights that lasted hours. In the first second, Crix lunged forward with his full strength and speed. His 7-foot frame moved like a landslide, rushing toward the small human girl. His clawed hands reached out to grab her, intending to lift her into the air and crush her ribs like twigs. His mouth was open, showing all his razor-sharp teeth as he prepared to bite down on whatever part of her he could reach, but Hana was already moving. She dropped low and stepped to the right with a fluid motion that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Her body bent and twisted in ways that the more rigid alien anatomy could never match. She grabbed Crix's extended arm at exactly the right points, using leverage and anatomy knowledge that her species had perfected over millions of years. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the arena. Like a gunshot, Crix's forearm snapped at the radius and ulna, creating a compound fracture that would take months to heal properly. His scream of pain and shock was so loud that some aliens in the front rows covered their ears and backed away from the arena railing. In the second second, as Crix stumbled forward, carried by his own momentum, Hana moved behind him with the grace of a dancer. Her movements were so smooth and controlled that she looked like she was performing a rehearsed routine rather than fighting for her life. Her small hands found the exact spots along his spine where the nerve clusters were most vulnerable. These were pressure points that human warriors had discovered through thousands of years of combat experience, points where even a light touch could cause paralyzing pain, and where a precise strike could shut down entire sections of the nervous system. She struck 7 times in that second. Each blow was delivered with surgical precision, using just enough force to achieve the desired effect. Her fists moved like pistons, each strike calculated to disrupt a specific nerve pathway. Her target was not to cause pain, but to systematically shut down Crick's ability to control his own body. The strike sent shockwaves through Crick's nervous system. His brain began losing contact with his muscles, starting from his legs and working upward. His body, which had been a perfectly coordinated killing machine just moments before, was now betraying him as his own nerves stopped responding to his desperate commands. In the third second, Crick's began to fall. His legs buckled as the nerve signals from his brain could no longer reach the muscles that kept him upright. His remaining good arm flailed wildly as he tried to catch himself, but his coordination was already too damaged to be effective. Hana caught him as he fell. Her small hands guided his massive bulk toward the arena floor, controlling his descent, so that he would land safely rather than crashing, face first into the unforgiving metal surface. She could have let him fall and break his neck or shatter his skull, but she chose mercy instead. The choice to show restraint was perhaps the most terrifying thing about the entire fight. It showed that everything she had done was completely under her control. She had not been fighting desperately or wildly. She had been methodically dismantling an opponent while maintaining enough presence of mind to avoid causing permanent damage. By the end of that third second, Crix lay on his side, completely paralyzed from the neck down. His breathing was shallow and rapid, as his body tried to cope with the trauma his nervous system had just experienced. His eyes were wide with shock and fear as he stared up at the small human girl who had just destroyed him so completely. The arena was silent. The kind of deep, profound silence that comes when thousands of minds are trying to process something that should not be possible. Every alien in that vast space was staring at Hana, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. She stood over Crix calmly and quietly. Her breathing was normal and controlled, showing no signs of the exhaustion that should have come from such intense combat. Her clothes were not even wrinkled, and there was no sweat on her face. She looked like she had just finished a gentle warm-up exercise rather than a life-or-death battle. The medical teams that had been standing ready to treat the human girl's injuries found themselves rushing to help Crix instead. They surrounded his paralyzed form with emergency equipment, while their scanners tried to determine the extent of the damage to his nervous system. The arena master stood frozen with all four of his arms still raised in the position he had used to signal the start of combat. He had never seen anything like what had just happened in thousands of years of overseeing tournaments. His deep voice cracked slightly as he officially declared Hana the winner. The betting pools throughout the arena fell silent as massive amounts of money changed hands. The few aliens who had placed wagers on the human, despite the impossible odds, were now incredibly wealthy, while those who had bet against her lost fortunes that had taken lifetimes to accumulate. But the real change was not in the betting pools or the medical bay. It was in the way every creature in that arena now looked at the small human girl. The mockery and laughter were gone, replaced by something that had not been there before, a mixture of respect and fear, and the dawning realization that they had badly misjudged this species. News feeds throughout the galaxy began broadcasting footage of the fight. Scientists and military commanders on 1,000 different worlds stopped what they were doing to watch the impossible victory of a tiny human over a proven Vorthak warrior. The implications were staggering. If one untrained human girl could defeat a seasoned fighter like Crix so easily, what could trained human soldiers do? What could human special forces accomplish? What about human armies equipped with proper weapons and armor? Alien military planners began pulling up data about Earth, about human history, about the wars that this species had fought among themselves. What they found made their blood run cold. Humans had spent their entire recorded history perfecting the art of killing other humans. They had developed weapons and tactics and strategies that made other species' conflicts look like children's games. The small human girl in the arena had not used any weapons or advanced technology. She had defeated Crix using nothing but her natural abilities and knowledge that every human possessed simply by being born on Earth. If this was what an untrained human could do, what were the trained ones capable of? Back in the arena, Hana looked up at the thousands of staring aliens and gave them a small, polite nod of acknowledgement. It was not a gesture of arrogance or triumph. It was simply good manners, the kind of courtesy that well-raised humans showed to others. That simple nod somehow made her even more terrifying. It showed that she was not a mindless berserker or a lucky amateur. She was a calm, rational, intelligent being who had just demonstrated that she could end lives with casual efficiency whenever she chose to do so. The silence stretched on as every alien in the arena tried to process what this meant for their understanding of humans and their place in the galactic community. The small girl who had entered as a joke had just proven that her entire species was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. 3 seconds had changed everything. Within 1 hour of Hana's victory, the fight footage was being broadcast on every major news network across the galaxy. The 3-second defeat of Krix had been recorded from dozens of different angles, and each replay showed more details that made alien viewers increasingly uncomfortable on the Centauri trade hub. Massive screens in the commercial district showed the tiny human girl systematically dismantling a warrior who should have been able to kill her with one blow. Merchants and traders stopped their negotiations to watch the footage over and over, trying to understand what they had witnessed. The Galactic Military Academy on Proxima Prime called an emergency session. All classes were canceled as instructors and cadets gathered in the main auditorium to analyze the fight frame by frame. Senior officers who had spent centuries studying combat tactics found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare. Admiral Vex of the Andromedan Fleet pulled up classified files about human military history. What he found made his 4 stomachs churn with unease. Humans had fought wars that lasted decades using weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had developed tactics so brutal that other species would consider them war crimes. General Thok of the Rigelian Defense Force watched the arena footage with growing alarm. He had dismissed Earth as a minor threat because humans seemed small and soft compared to his own armored warriors. Now he was ordering his intelligence division to compile detailed reports about human capabilities. The most disturbing discovery was not what humans could do in combat, but what they chose not to do. The girl in the arena could have killed Krix easily, but she had shown restraint. This suggested a level of control and discipline that made them even more dangerous than mindless berserkers. Species that had been planning to challenge human expansion into their territories quietly began reconsidering their positions. The hegemony of Vorth, which had been mobilizing fleets to blockade human trade routes, suddenly found urgent reasons to pursue diplomatic solutions. Instead, 3 days after the fight, the first formal diplomatic request arrived at Earth Central Command. The Altarian Republic wanted to establish a full embassy and negotiate trade agreements. The message was polite and respectful in a way that previous alien communications to humanity had never been. More requests followed. The Capellan Union offered military cooperation agreements. The Sirius Consortium proposed joint research projects. The Beta Centauri Alliance suggested cultural exchange programs. All of these were species that had previously ignored or dismissed human attempts at diplomacy back in the arena. Hana continued to fight in the tournament, but everything had changed. Her opponents approached her with caution and respect rather than arrogance and contempt. They fought at their absolute best because they knew that anything less would result in swift defeat. She won some fights and lost others, but that was not the point anymore. She had already achieved something far more important than tournament victory. She had forced the entire galaxy to recognize that humans were not the weak newcomers they appeared to be. In the medical bay, Krix slowly recovered under the care of the galaxy's finest doctors. His paralysis faded after 6 hours, and feeling returned to his limbs after 12. The E-Dai's physical damage would heal completely, but the psychological impact would last much longer. When reporters finally gained access to interview him, his words became legendary across 1,000 worlds. He spoke quietly and seriously about the mistake he had made in judging the human by her appearance. He admitted that he had forgotten the most basic rule of survival: never underestimate an opponent based on size alone. He described the moment when he realized that the small human girl was far more dangerous than she looked. It was like discovering that what you thought was a harmless pet was actually a perfectly camouflaged apex predator. He said that humans were the most frightening opponents he had ever faced, not because of their strength, but because of their intelligence and self-control. The interview was broadcast throughout Vorthak space and had an immediate impact. The warrior culture that had looked down on smaller species began to reconsider their attitudes. Martial arts academies started teaching courses about fighting opponents who were smaller but more skilled. On Earth, the news of Hana's victory sparked celebrations in every major city. Humans who had felt like second-class citizens in the galactic community suddenly found themselves being treated with respect and even fear. The change in attitude was dramatic and immediate. Human colonies that had been struggling to establish trade relationships found alien merchants lining up to do business with them. Space stations that had restricted human access quietly lifted their discriminatory policies. Shipping companies that had refused to hire human crews suddenly discovered they had openings available. The Galactic Council, which had been considering legislation to limit human expansion, held an emergency session. The proposed restrictions were quietly shelved without even being brought to a vote. Instead, council members began discussing how to integrate humanity more fully into galactic affairs. Military observers from dozens of species requested permission to visit Earth to study human combat techniques and training methods. They wanted to understand how a species that looked so fragile could produce warriors capable of such devastating effectiveness. Human martial arts instructors found themselves overwhelmed with requests from alien students who wanted to learn the techniques that Hana had demonstrated. Species that had their own ancient fighting traditions suddenly wanted to understand how humans approached combat. The most significant change was in how alien children were taught about humans. Before the arena fight, human stories were used as examples of how small, weak species could sometimes get lucky and survive through cleverness. Rather than strength after Hana's victory, the stories changed. Human tales became cautionary stories about the danger of judging others by their appearance. Children across the galaxy learned that the most dangerous predators were often the ones that looked harmless until it was too late. Years passed, and the arena where Hana had defeated Crix became a pilgrimage site for young warriors from across the galaxy. They came to see the spot where a small human girl had changed how an entire galaxy viewed her species. A memorial plaque was installed at the exact location where the fight had taken place. The inscription was written in hundreds of languages and simply read, "Never underestimate the quiet ones." The message had become a universal truth, that every species in the galaxy now understood Hana herself returned to Earth as more than just a tournament fighter. She had become an ambassador without meaning to. Her 3-second victory had opened doors that human diplomats had been trying to unlock for decades. Human space exploration programs received funding offers from alien governments who wanted to partner with this unexpectedly formidable species. Trade agreements that had been stalled for years were suddenly approved with favorable terms for human merchants. The girl who had been slapped across an arena and responded with precision control and devastating effectiveness had become a symbol. She represented not just human capability, but human restraint. The galaxy had learned that humans were dangerous, not because they were aggressive, but because they were disciplined. In schools across human space, children learned about Hana Kim, and the day she changed everything, they were taught that true strength came not from being the biggest or loudest, but from being prepared, skilled, and in control of oneself. The arena still stands today, and tour groups from across the galaxy come to visit. The guides always end their presentations with the same words. On this spot, one human girl taught the universe that appearances can be deceiving. Strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful response to violence is controlled precision rather than wild fury. The lesson of that day continues to echo through galactic politics and diplomacy. Never judge a species by the size of its individuals. Never assume that quiet means weak. And always remember that the most dangerous opponents are often the ones who choose mercy when they could have chosen destruction. Hana Kim had taken 3 seconds to end a fight, but her victory would influence galactic affairs for generations to come.